Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're here today to talk about the Raiding Project Gutenberg readathon and Rasselas by Samuel Johnson, not Samuel L. Jackson, which my brain still converts to the wrong person every time. I am here with Christy and Tiffany, and very soon Stephanie will be joining us. You guys want to introduce yourself? I think everyone pretty much knows everyone else, but for anyone that might be watching this back later.
Sure. I'll start. I'm Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space, and I just love reading with these ladies, and it's really fun because we often will pick classics and read them together. So this time it was Rasselas. I really enjoy reading classics, and that's a lot of what I talk about on my channel as well.
And I'm Tiffany, and I too read a lot of classics on my channel. I would say it's probably my favorite genre. Stephanie, hi! But it's been fun because we've been reading a lot of classics together this year as like group reads, and so then to do Raiding Project Gutenberg together kind of almost felt like a natural transition to do that. Yes. I love your shirt, Stephanie. It's really cute.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
We're introducing ourselves, so I guess it's your turn because I just finished. You had perfect timing.
I just ran in here. Lucy made a huge mess, so I was like rushing to make it in here. I'm Stephanie. My channel is Miss Richards Reads, and I mainly read fantasy classics and cozy mysteries. And I'm just chaos today, so happy to be here.
That's my life. It's just general chaos. And we also had Mark with Book Time with Elvis that joined us. He unfortunately got the flu this weekend, so he's not able to join us today. But I had a great time reading with you guys and with Mark, and I can't wait for our next buddy read together. So let's just jump right in. I know there was a lot of mixed feelings on Rasselas. So let's talk first about the readathon and what were your favorite books that you read during the readathon?
I think my favorite was The Importance of Being Earnest, which really surprised me because I know this is like blasphemy, but I'm not a huge fan of Dorian Gray. And I know that's like everyone's favorites. And I've read The Happy Prince and other stories, and it was okay. It had some really good ones, and it had some so-so ones. But I really, really liked The Importance of Being Earnest. It was hilarious. And I just laughed out loud the whole time I was reading it.
Totally different vibes than Dorian Gray.
Yes. Yeah, but I think it was one where I read it at just the right time, and the comedy just hit with me, and it was fabulous.
Wow, that makes me want to read it too.
Yeah, I have not read that yet.
It's great.
Yes. That could have been our unofficial read. Didn't both of you guys read it, Kate and Stephanie?
Yeah.
I read it because Kate really liked it, and I was like, I'm going to try it.
Yes. Mark was very familiar with it as well.
Yeah, I think Mark had read it before.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed it. And then after I finished reading the play, I went and watched the movie adaptation, and it was so good. Had Colin Firth in it.
Yes.
And the guy from My Best Friend's Wedding. I forget his name. Okay. It was so good.
People in the chat too can let us know what their favorite read was.
Please do. Thank you, Chrissy. I tend to forget about people in the chat because there's usually not anyone in the chat.
I'm like super curious because Tony's in the chat and he always finds like such interesting things.
He does, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think that my favorite book for the readathon, there's still one that I hope to get to before November's over. Christy found like a Russian short story that I really want to try, but I haven't yet. So that may end up being a favorite overall. But besides that, I think I read, Christy read this also, Southern Horrors by Ida B. Wells. And I took my time reading it because it's obviously very heavy and sad content, and it made me angry and sick at certain points. But like, it was so like, I feel like every person who lives in the United States needs to read this if they have not. I think it's just really important. So I can't say like I enjoyed it, but I think that out of all the things that I read, I think that that was just like the most impactful. I really am happy that I read it.
I'm hoping to get to that one before the end of November too.
It's
That's
so
good.
short. You should be
Yeah.
able to.
Yeah.
And it's like, it pulls you along. Like the outrage of it is just like, it's unbelievable what people actually published in the newspapers in
Yeah.
the South.
Yeah.
It's
Crazy.
just like, people actually wrote this and they got away with it.
And people agreed with them?
Yeah.
People believed it. Oh, I know. But of course, we have the same problem too with today's news where people don't know what to believe. So
That's true.
not much changes with the press. It's always outrageous, I think.
Yeah.
But I think that was also my most impactful read. Although, like Tiffany, before the end of the month, I'm hoping to get to that Russian book. I'll find the name of it.
I can't remember what it was called and who it was by because it was by a Russian author I hadn't heard of before. Chrissy had found a list of like classic like Russian short stories, and this one was on there.
Yeah, Jenny sent me a reel of like 5 Russian authors you need to read because you probably haven't yet. And I was like, no, I haven't. So it's The Steel Flea by N.S. Leskov. And the reviews on Goodreads weren't like amazing, but it was available on Project Gutenberg and it's very short. Never read anything by him. So try it.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Right now, I'm in the middle of Father Gory by Balzac. And I wasn't sure what to expect when I went into it. I found it to be unexpectedly funny because it's like a bunch of old French ladies gossiping about an old Frenchman that has these 2 younger women come to visit him in this apartment building that he's staying in, and they think that they're his mistresses, but it's his daughters. It's just like the gossip that goes back and forth is hilarious.
I'm going to read that next year, so I'm really happy to hear you talk about it because I had no idea what it was about. I just like found a really pretty edition at a thrift store, so it's going on my list for next year.
The audiobook is really good too.
That's good
I'm
to
glad
know.
to hear that it's funny.
Yeah.
I like funny classics.
Me too.
It's just like that. Like I just picture like old Southern ladies gossiping around the neighborhood.
On the porch with their
Right, they're like, "Ooh, he's got 1 mistress, he's got 2 mistresses," and then like at one point they couldn't keep track of the 2 women coming in and out, and they thought there was like 4 different women. He's like, "No, there's just 2, and they're my daughters," and they didn't believe him. They're like, "Oh yeah, your daughters."
Oh dear.
I love the idea of it being Southern women. They're probably like, "Oh, bless his heart, but he's got these women."
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Ooh, I haven't heard of that one.
I haven't either. Now I have to go look at
It sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That sounds really interesting.
Yes,
Definitely.
I'm Googling that.
Hmm.
Thank you, Tony. You always have cool
you.
recommendations.
I know.
Yes.
Well, did you guys have any duds this month?
Stephanie did not. I know that. She read books. It was a book.
It's a bud.
Tell us about it, Stephanie.
It was the theme of our last live.
I had high hopes for that thing too. Nina
I don't think I had any duds, actually. Well, I mean, because I wouldn't really count Rasselas as a dud, even though I have mixed thoughts on it, which we'll get to. I don't feel like it was a waste of time for me to read it or anything. And then I also read Little Men by Louisa May Alcott. And so I don't feel like anything I read was like awful or anything like that. Thankfully.
Yay.
Yeah. Mine wasn't awful. It was just, have you seen Because I Said So with Diane Keaton and Mandy Moore? And okay, there's this scene. One of the sisters is a therapist, and she has this patient that always says he's going to commit suicide, and he never does. He just does it for attention. And so she finally gets fed up with him, and she's like opening a window, and she's like, if you're going to do it, just do it. I'm done. And there was one scene in this book, and it reminded me of that because I'm just like, oh my God, just do it already. If you're going to do it, like, move on. It was so melodramatic, which is so horrible of me, but it just dragged. But, you know, they can't all be winners, and that's okay.
He was a very prolific writer. So, you know, you win some, you lose some when you write that much, maybe. I don't know.
And I've enjoyed all the other ones I've read by him, so.
There's a reason this one wasn't as famous.
Yeah.
For me, I went with, I haven't gotten to my nonfiction read yet. I'm still hoping to get to that in the last 3 days of this month. We'll see. I kind of picked books that I had a feeling I was going to absolutely love. And so it didn't really, I mean, the lowest rating that I've had so far of books that I finished was Rasselas, and I still enjoyed that read. I almost felt like I was in like my brain has been so crazy lately. It's been so stressed out with work and school and everything that it almost felt like this last month was like a fever dream. And so as I was reading Rasselas, I'm like, oh, these are pretty words. I have no idea what's happening, but this is pretty. But I've read The Importance of Being Earnest, which was just perfect for that time. And the other book that I finished was The Last Man by Mary Shelley. And like I've read, I think that's my fourth or fifth book by Mary Shelley that I've read now. And she just never lets me down. The way that was not funny at all because it's Mary Shelley and like she can't write funny. I mean she can, but you know what I mean.
This is not
right. So this was a post-apocalyptic story about basically like everyone is dying of the plague. And it was just Mary Shelley's way with emotions. For me, she has a way of writing characters where you feel exactly the emotions that they're going through, and you feel sympathetic for every character in the book, no matter whether they're good or bad. And so this was one of the books I was supposed to read earlier this year, was on a previous TBR, and I found it on Project Gutenberg, and I'm like, this is perfect because I love Mary Shelley, and this will also get me caught up at least one book from one of my other TBRs.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about that one.
It's supposed to be, from the summaries that I read before I read the book, they said after Frankenstein, it's her most important book. And this was the book that she wrote right after Percy died. And there's characters in this book, like a lot of her other books, that have, representation of both Percy, Shelley, and Byron.
Oh, cool.
And it was just like, it was really well done. I listened to the audiobook, and I want to go back and reread it sometime with the physical words in front of me, just to capture the true brilliance of Mary Shelley. So shall we slide into talking about Rasselas?
Yeah.
All right. So let's start off I really didn't have any plan for this live show. I just kind of wing my live shows and see where the conversation goes. I know a lot of us had mixed feelings about this book, even though we still enjoyed at least parts of it. I guess let's first start talking about what did you all rate it? And those in the chat that read along with us, let us know what you rated Rasselas to.
I think mine is going to be the most unpopular. I didn't hate my time reading it, so it's not like horrible, but I think I would give it like 2.5 because I found it very forgettable. Like, I don't remember a bunch of it, and I just read it this week. Like, it wasn't bad, and I enjoyed parts of it, but I don't remember really anything from it. And I didn't think it was badly written either. It was just,
I'm not that much higher above you, Stephanie, because I gave it 3 stars. Which to me is a book that it's fine, but it's not like a favorite. I didn't love it. I thought that overall, like, parts of it were funny. I thought that it had some really good quotes in it, but I thought that it should have been maybe like an essay on philosophy, because there was really no plot or characterization to speak of. So,
and that's probably why I found it super forgettable, because there wasn't stuff to like reference.
Right.
Yeah.
I also, go ahead, Chrissy.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I also gave it 3 stars, and I know there was like a bunch of times while I was reading it that I was like messaging Christy and everyone in our chat, and I'm like, am I missing the plot here, or is it just like these 2 people going around and like talking to random people?
Nope, that's the plot.
I kept waiting for like something else to happen, like something big and momentous to happen to like make it a story. But then it just like they just went and found new people to talk to, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess this is what it's gonna be.
I have sort of adopted a policy of not finishing 3-star reads. That's not entirely true for everything, but I really was getting the sense that this was going to be around a 3-star read, and I got about halfway through it, and then I was like, I'm going to look up what happens on Britannica, because like it's an intellectually interesting journey that the prince is going on.
Right.
It's like I'm invested in finding out what he finds out. But I just didn't like the story format. I guess with allegory, I'm kind of picky because allegory can be too heady and not enough heart. I feel like books, like novels, generally, I like them to be an emotional experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As well as a heady experience, but not just heady,
Or like, if you have me care about the character, if there's not much of a plot, I'm okay with that.
Right.
But there really wasn't a lot to go on with this one.
Yeah.
And
I still have to. Sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I still feel like he does deserve props for the fact that he wrote this over the course of like a week. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
it's far better than anything I would have written over the course of like a year. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely super impressive that he did
Yeah, I
that.
mean, it's still Samuel Johnson, so.
Yeah.
And I think if you're super into philosophy, and talking about that, I think it might be more interesting.
Mhm.
But it's just not really my thing, I think.
I was waiting for like not only something to happen, but like a big epiphany to happen or something, you know, like one of these random people that they go to talk to become someone. But it just seemed like they were like almost like everyday people in this town, just with like the astronomer title attached to him, or, you know, philosopher attached to him. And so it was like, I had a hard time finding, besides the philosophical discussion, what the point of it was.
It was a book of random conversations.
It reminded me a bit of Lord Jim in parts of
Yeah,
it, because it
definitely.
kept making fun of like the wish fulfillment dreams that the prince had and stuff like that. So I think Samuel Johnson is a delight, and I can see why in person he would be a delight.
Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't translate very well onto the page in this particular specimen writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did like his sense of humor. He had some funny
Yeah.
parts. So I would read more by him. I don't think I would ever reread this one, but I would read his other stuff.
More
I could-
instructive.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I don't think it was very entertaining. It was, yeah.
It felt like something you'd read for class and then discuss it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
And maybe like for, you know, when I read classics, I try to think about the audience that the author is writing for. And maybe in Samuel Johnson's day, this would have been a lot more popular because they didn't have so much of our, you know, fantasy world and our science fiction world and all of the fictional books that we have now. Maybe to them that was like our fantasy today, essentially. And so it was a lot more interesting to his audience as he was writing it than ours.
Yeah.
The Britannica article about Samuel Johnson said exactly that. It was like, this was an Oriental story. It was called an Oriental tale, which was very popular at the time. So that was kind of like their fantasy novel at the time. That's a really good way of putting it, Kate.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I also, Kate, not Kate, Faith from Faith in Books said that this was actually a response to Candide, which I didn't know.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't read that one yet, but I have heard a lot about it.
Yeah.
It's on my list for next year too.
I didn't know it was going to be so philosophical. I expected a traditional adventure.
Yeah.
But I didn't really read the blurb before going into it.
I also didn't expect there to be like more than one main character. Because we had the prince, which is the title, but then we had like the princess and then Imlac also, that they kind of like, they went off on their adventures and talked to like random people, and then it was almost like they reported back to their teacher what they found or their parent. Like, I was like, what function is this guy other than a vessel for them to tell their stories in? Like, why do we have him in this story?
That may be it.
Yeah, that may be it.
I mean, other than that, I didn't really have. I've read the blurb going in just so I kind of had some idea of what the book was about. But I had forgotten most of what the blurb said by the time I actually was reading the book. And so I didn't really have a lot of expectations. I knew of Samuel Johnson's name, but I hadn't read any of his major works before. So I didn't really have a lot of expectations other than, well, this was a pick by Christy, so I'm sure this is good. And it's Samuel Johnson, so it has to be good on some level because he's such a prolific name. Beyond that, I didn't really have many expectations.
Yeah.
I kind of assumed there would be some philosophical stuff in it because my understanding going into it was that it was kind of his quest for meaning and happiness in life. And so I figured that there would be conversations along the way, but beyond that was like my only expectation going in. So I didn't know that, you know, conversations don't necessarily really feel like conversations a lot of times in the book. They feel more like the author telling us different viewpoints rather than actual conversations between characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, it very much was. I think I did kind of expect philosophical going in, but I didn't necessarily know that it was going to be allegory, and I did think that it would be funny, you know. So,
but I think that the beginning kind of was funny, like, but then after they left the valley, it wasn't as funny anymore.
Yeah. I feel like Imlach really sets the tone. Like, your search for happiness is doomed from the beginning. That's what he did for me.
Basically.
Yes. It's like, I've lived here in this valley where you have everything. I've lived out in the world where it's different, and it's all the same. I don't care whether we go or we stay.
Yes.
Yeah. Very, I think the humor is what saved me at the beginning to keep going. Because if it had been super philosophical at the beginning, I probably would not have gotten through it. And it's so short. It's not even that long.
Right. But it felt long.
It did.
I feel like, and I hate to say this because I don't do this often, but if it wasn't for our live show and our read along, if I was just reading this on my own, I probably would have DNF'd it at the beginning. But I was like, no, I'm going to stick it through. I'm sure it gets better from here. I can't DNF a book that I'm hosting a live show for because that would just not be good.
It happens. And
I mean Dr. Zhivago.
Yeah.
But like, I also am a person, it takes a lot for me to actually DNF a book.
Yeah.
I think I've had 1, maybe 2 books this entire year that I've DNF'd, and those were books that I just the one book that I have in mind that I know I definitely DNF'd was a book that the subject matter was too much for me. There wasn't any story at all, and it was just, I couldn't continue or else it would put me into a deep hole.
Yeah.
It was a very depressing book, you know, those kinds of books. But for the most part, I usually push through because usually there's something that I find in a book, whether it's at the beginning or at the end or in the middle, that I can take away from it.
Yeah.
And I did enjoy parts of it, and even though it felt like it got bogged down a lot in the philosophical talk, those were the times where I was writing down quotes also from this book. Mm-hmm. So there was still a lot that I was able to take away from this read, and I'm glad that we read it, even though we didn't. It wasn't our favorite read of the readathon.
Yeah. I just found it so forgettable, and I did not DNF it, but I don't remember a good chunk of it. But I think it's like we said, there wasn't a plot, so I can't really like, oh, I remember this person because this happened and they were there, or a funny conversation. There really wasn't anything to like hold on to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like there's a conceit. It's a big conceit of Searching for Happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of characterized by a young man going through life, and like a lot of time passes too for this young man, so I feel like it's really the journey of life, you know. Searching for happiness, never finding it.
Exactly.
So what did you guys feel like the ending kind of concluded about this search for happiness?
It didn't.
Okay, so it was inconclusive.
What was
Yeah,
the name of the last chapter, Kate? You put it in the chat. What was
oh
it?
my
Like,
gosh, hold on.
in
let
which
me-
nothing is decided or something like
yeah, it
that?
was
Or
something like the conclusion of.
yeah.
Hold on.
So really nothing. They basically just
My
came to
favorite part were the
realize.
chapter titles.
Yeah,
They did have good chapter titles.
they did.
A conclusion
They did.
in which nothing is concluded.
There we go. Yeah,
And
knew
I
it was
read
something
that and I'm
that.
like, okay, so this is going to be like a fake conclusion, and then we'll have another chapter after this
Nope.
that wraps it up. And then I got to the end of the chapter, I'm like, oh, that really
That's
is the end.
I feel like they just kind of decided like find joy in the little things that you can get it in because nothing's lasting. That was kind of the conclusion. I feel like different
Yeah.
people find joy and meaning in different things.
Don't go searching for happiness. Find it. Happiness is right in front of you if you know where to look.
Yeah.
See, look, you just summed up the whole book in one sentence, Kate. Good job.
Well done.
Yeah.
I feel like he
They could
did learn some things. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say we could probably also include in the summary, it wasn't really about the journey. It was about the friends we made along the way.
There you go.
That
They
fits
did make
too.
a lot of friends.
To quote Brandon Sanderson, "Journey before destination."
Yeah.
There you go.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Brandon Sanderson must have read Rasselas.
Be curious to hear his thoughts.
Right?
How philosophical.
Oh,
And I feel like he did learn things along the way as well.
Definitely.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of the quotes that I also highlighted a lot, Kate. And so that was when I was reading very slowly, which was often the case. It was often because I was also highlighting.
Right.
So like few things are impossible with diligence, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I would have liked it more if I had read it slower. Like started it earlier. So that's on me. But that's also like my usual thing. I started at the last minute. So.
Well, I mean, I think it's also a testament to the writing style that you read it the most recent out of any of us, and it's forgettable to you. You don't remember half of it. So I feel the same way, but I also have a horrible memory. And so I just thought it was me and my memory, because most of the time I don't remember. That's why I take so many notes when I'm reading, because most of the time, no matter how good the book is, I forget half of it by the time I'm done.
Yeah.
So I thought it was just me.
No.
I wouldn't say, Fina, I wouldn't say it's boring, because there were a lot of parts that were, at least for me, were intriguing and interesting. To me, a boring book is just where I don't find anything interesting at all. So I wouldn't say it was boring. A downer, maybe, because, I mean, the beginning there were parts that were funny, but then once they left the valley, that humor and the wit kind of went away. But I wouldn't say it was boring.
And I don't know if it was really a downer. It was just kind of meh.
Yeah, it wasn't sad or I don't know.
It didn't make me feel any huge emotions.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think that if you went into it with the expectation of this is more of a philosophical conversation than a story,
Yeah.
you would have a much different experience than we had, because I think if we had known that going in, we would have approached it differently and had different expectations.
Absolutely.
And probably would have gotten more out of it, at least on my end of it,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
See, I don't remember that part at all.
I remember that.
I do remember
everything
that.
pretty
It was like a
well.
balloon, right? Like he tried to do it with like like an air balloon kind of a thing. That was actually, to me, one of the funniest parts of the book, because it just crashed and burned and it was over so fast. I was just like,
And they
everyone's
spent
so
like a whole
excited.
year on it.
Yes, and then it was just like,
Oh,
that's it.
that's a bad day.
Right.
But you
That
do
would probably
make a
happen to
good
me
point.
if I tried to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's kind of a downer.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
okay. So there's downer moments.
I mean, if we're okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we know that Helen Burns from Jane Eyre is the one recommending this, so that alone gave me some expectations going in.
That's a good
I totally
point.
forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
I completely forgot about that.
That's why I wanted to read it, because I was like, I want to be enlightened like Helen Burns. But yeah, it was just, yeah, I feel like what Tiffany said, as an essay, I think I would have really liked it, but it was just too long. And
or even a short story.
So maybe if he like really edited it and had like a 2.0 version, I think I would have really liked it and found it memorable.
yes.
But I think since this was so rushed, because he did it because he needed money.
Right.
Mhm.
Because so we had for the people in the chat, we had like a side conversation while we were all reading this, and in the introduction to Rasselas, it said that Samuel Johnson wrote this in a week to basically pay for the medical bills for his mom, who was dying at the time. And so that's kind of the backstory of what we're talking about when we mention how quickly this was written and why it was written. Aside from the response to Candide.
Yeah. So maybe if, somebody had read it, they'd be like, hey, dude, it's too long. Let's shorten it and then give it to the world.
Can we have a little character development also?
Yes.
Yes. At least for me, when I was revising was really when my voice come out, when I was writing a lot. So I feel like he would have made it, he would have probably enhanced the comedy of it as well if he had had more time for revision.
Definitely.
When I was in my MFA, one of my writing professors always said that the true magic of writing comes out in the editing and the revising, and not the pen to paper stages or fingers to keyboards.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right.
Wrote a book to make money.
Only, and it doesn't even have to be a fabulous book. A book.
The shade Stephanie's throwing right now.
I'm sorry.
Is Lucy there throwing shade at you? Is that why?
No, she's mad at me right now. I drove from my mother's house this morning, and it's 3 hours, and she literally meowed the entire 3 hours.
Oh my gosh.
And then as soon as we got out and got in my apartment, she's been yelling at me for the 2 hours that I've been home.
How dare you?
We're about to have a falling out.
Oh no.
Can Oliver mediate?
Oliver kept meowing at her randomly, like telling her to shut up. And then now Oliver's just in the other room in her own little cone of silence.
She's over it.
Yeah. Like, get over it. We're home. We're fine.
You
Yeah, we're talking about you.
I agree with this. I also think it's really
Yeah.
interesting when they had the whole chapters on marriage,
Yeah.
that the princess was the one who's like, nah, there's no joy to be found in marriage. There's no like, and normally, stereotypically, that would be opposite. It would be like the man who's like, I don't really need marriage, so this is
Right.
fine. Whereas women at the time probably needed it more just because it was hard for them to do things. They didn't have those opportunities. But she's like, no, women don't really need marriage. Like, and I think it was interesting that those stereotypical roles were very reversed in that chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did like that.
Do we have any more thoughts that we wanted to share?
I'm curious what Andreas rated it, because
Yes.
they seem to have like very coherent thoughts about it.
Yeah, I feel like they got the most out of it out of all of us.
Yeah.
I'm glad because they're sharing their wisdom with us too. So
And
Yes,
having-
thank you.
This would have
This is why
been like
buddy
a
reading's good.
10-minute live show if it wasn't for
Right.
Andreas.
saving the day.
This is why live show discussions are fun. You could get a lot out of it because
Yeah.
other people will have thoughts to share.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Definitely makes you think about it differently when you see other people's opinions.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you got so much out of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it usually will make a book worth at least giving a real sporting shot at reading it, because the live show makes it worth it, you know? It's
Right.
more fun.
Yes.
Like poor Dr. Zhivago.
Oh, that might be one of my favorite live shows though, because it was hilarious that none of us finished it.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So our next book that we're going to be reading, at least the four of us will be reading it, is Demons by Fyodor Dostoevsky, starting in December. This will be hosted on the Codex Cantina Discord, and we'll have reading sprints and on this channel and a live show on Tiffany's channel. I think 1 or 2 live shows. And we're going to be reading this December through February because it's such a big book. So we want to get the most out of Demons. I'm super excited for this. I know Una and Chrissy have already looked ahead a little bit and are already enjoying what they're seeing. So I can't wait to dive into this.
Yeah, I've owned that book for like 15 years and haven't read it yet. So I'm very excited.
That's impressive, Stephanie.
Stephanie hasn't. Or Kate. Wow. I feel like you guys have read so much. I said a book that neither of you guys have read. I'm just like, wow.
I know. I have my Barnes & Noble edition down there when those were super popular. Haven't read it yet.
I mean, for me, I've only just started tipping my toe into Russian lit. Really, when I became friends with Christy is when, I mean, I read War and Peace in college, and I read Madame Bovary. And like beyond that, my Russian lit, and I read Crime and Punishment, and I think that's, you know, to the extent of where my Russian literature really was, aside from like some short stories and stuff. So unless we've read it together, chances are I haven't read it yet if it's Russian lit.
The link to the Discord is in my announcement video, by the way, if anyone wants to join the Discord.
Yes.
And I'll put it in here once this goes live too.
Yeah, and at least if we don't like that one, I feel like there will be enough in it to really have a good.
Oh yeah, Dostoevsky always gives you stuff to discuss.
He has drama and comedy and philosophy, and this one's actually like based on a political murder, I think. So like I'm just so intrigued.
There's nothing like a good murder.
Yeah. We
Stephanie
can make
said
the
it.
book.
Well, if there's no more thoughts for this one, we will sign off here. Everyone out in the chat, thank you guys so much for joining us. And thank you, Christy, Tiffany, and Stephanie, and Mark out there in Fluland. Thank you guys for joining us today. This was a great live show. I had so much fun. And I look forward to our next read next month.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you for hosting this, Kate.
Yes, thank you.